Welcome to the Art of We podcast. Today is a special episode. Our guests share an extraordinary journey of how they've been able to create a healthy and harmonious relationship after their divorce. What I love about these two individuals, as you'll hear in their moving story, is that they're both willing to use their heartbreaking breakdown of their marriage as a catalyst for real growth, healing, and transformation. Through tears and laughter, they share their unique story of how they got from divorce to where they are today. Super close friends, supporting one another's personal lives, and collaborating at new levels in their professional lives. In fact, after they got divorced, they teamed up to create an award-winning feature-length documentary about her journey overcoming breast cancer, Crohn's disease, and toxic mold illness. A brilliant and inspiring documentary we highly recommend called Doctor/Patient, which we also discuss on today's episode. A little bit about our guests. Dr. Jill Carnahan, by the way, you will be blown away by her journey when you see the documentary. She's a functional medicine expert who's duly board certified and is the founder and medical director of Flatiron Functional Medicine here in Colorado. She specializes in searching for underlying causes of illness through cutting-edge lab testing and personalized medicine protocols. She's also a speaker and a best-selling author. Her now ex-husband, Aaron Carnahan, is an award-winning producer and writer who's passionate about inspiring and giving hope to the world through the wonder of film and entertainment. Aaron has produced 4 seasons of network television, multiple music videos, 2 feature-length documentaries, and an award-winning feature film. We hope you enjoy this episode. If you're interested in finding out more about Dr. Jill and Aaron, we'll definitely include their social media and website links in the show notes, as well as where to find their documentary. Without further ado, let's jump in. Welcome, Jill. Welcome, Aaron. It's so good to have the two of you on this podcast episode. Thank you so much for coming and being here. And we know that this topic is very important to our audience and to many people out there these days. And as we mentioned in the intro, the topic is healthy relationship after divorce. And so we're very excited to get into your inspiring story. I know both of your stories, there's a lot to your stories. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting into this today.
Thanks for having us. We're so excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
So I thought we would just start by giving a little bit of flavor to how the two of you met and when you met, so we can have a context of how this relationship began in the first place.
Aaron, do you want me to go first?
No, go ahead. You got it.
Gosh, I met Aaron at 19 years old, and at that time I thought I was quite mature. Looking back, I'm like, I was a babe, right? We had a very instant, deep connection, and we were married when I was 21. He had 3 children from a previous marriage, so I inherited 3 children, lovely, wonderful, and marriage, and then instantly into medical school. And just looking back, the beautiful thing about our almost 20 years together was there was a lot of love, commitment. We had a great relationship until we didn't. And we'll tell that story today about what happened to kind of unravel, because I think it's not uncommon to probably many of your listeners. And we've learned a lot in the process. But the biggest thing that I look back at is we were both full of hope and optimism, like many young people are. And we didn't really go deep. He avoided pain and I avoided conflict. And as you can imagine, when you avoid pain and conflict, I'm an Enneagram 9 who doesn't like conflict. He's an Enneagram 7 who doesn't like pain. So we had happy, joyful, adventurous 20 years together. But we never went to the deep areas of trauma and pain until everything fell apart. And then we started to realize what we were missing in that. And I feel like that the divorce actually allowed us both to awaken to those deeper parts of ourselves that needed to be healed.
Yeah, I would even say that we thought that we were going to the deep places, and we thought we had a lot of depth in our relationship. I remember even when we were engaged, Jill had all of this, she's always well prepared. So like if we're going to, we need to know how we're going to do money. We need to know how the 5 love languages, and I had so much homework in that time period that she gave me, which was really cool. And it did help our relationship, and it helped it to be strong. And even through difficult times, like when she got cancer and things like that, I would say at that time, we still felt that, or at least I did, that we had a lot of depth to our relationship. But looking back on it now, what we did is we got through those things by like me being completely 100% positive and joking and like, hey, we're just getting through this, and we're like ignoring all of the pain and all of the stress and all of that because that wasn't allowed, And so I really don't, wouldn't you say, Jill, that we thought that we had some depth, a lot of depth to our marriage?
Yeah, I absolutely like there was no, I would have never before the divorce I would have said I have the best husband in the world. Divorce wasn't an option. There was no thought of that. So there was a very much, but again, I tend to live in that magical bubble of everything's perfect and avoid the difficult things. And what I realized is when things get really difficult, if you are not capable of having those conversations around your needs, we were both probably a little bit avoidant, hyper independent. And we taught couples therapy in our church to couples. We did work with couples, like we gave them modeling. And what we did was we had these parallel lives that were really, really beautiful until our lives fell apart. And when they fell apart right before the divorce, we didn't know how. We didn't have the language around saying, I actually need you. I need you to show up in this way, because we were so hyper independent that we thought we could take care of ourselves and just like show up for the fun, the adventure, and again, we thought we had this connection until both of our lives in separate areas fell apart and we were alone and isolated and not able to have the language around saying, I actually need you to show up in this way.
Yeah, that sounds kind of familiar to a 20-year relationship marriage I was in before a divorce. And the way I describe it, I use the term silos a lot.
Yes.
Because we were Buddhist practitioners, and we had a couple therapist who was a Buddhist, and his view was you take everything that's hard for you back to the cushion and go and work with it yourself. And there's no aspect of interdependence. Anything that sounds like interdependence is called codependence in that model. And so you develop that strength with yourself on your cushion, and you never spill out your, so to speak, messy stuff to your partner, and it's supposed to work out great. And then about 15 years into that relationship, I started hearing about this interpersonal psychology and ways that a more, let's say, advanced couple therapy program was starting to like gain a lot of momentum of like how to actually have healthy interdependence and how important that is, and how unless you're an orangutan, then you're probably a social primate, right? And so social primates actually need each other. They need to be interdependent with each other. So anyway, I can totally relate to this sense of security and strength and independence that you just described.
I'm also curious too, with this avoidance of pain and avoidance of conflict and positivity being brought in. I think that there's probably a lot of couples out there who are in that and they don't know that they're not going deep, just like the two of you are realizing now, looking back. I'm just curious at this moment what you might say to the couples or the persons who like, yeah, I guess I tend to bring a lot of positivity. We can make it through this. We're going to avoid the pain. We're going to stuff it down. I'm curious, like, what you would say to them about what you know now about being inside of that kind of relationship. I'm wondering, Aaron, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great question, because you spoke on something, and Jill said we didn't know how to say I need, and then Will, you said, there's that fear of codependency and everything, which I was actually very codependent, and had learned through some therapy what that meant and all of that stuff. And so even inside of that worry of going into a codependent type of lifestyle is a big fear of mine. But yet also I had to learn that space of being able to say, I need, and the key for me was being able to learn to start that statement by I feel and when, and then I need. And that was just such a monumental shift for me in every relationship, whether it be romantic relationship or work relationship or friendships, of being able to express those things and knowing that place that keeps it from being codependent is when that person can't maybe mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever, meet that need, It's up to me to take care of that situation now. And that was a big mind shift, that it's okay to ask. And it's also okay for them to say, I can't do that exactly, or I need to do that in a different way than you might see it need to transpire. And so that was incredible for me. And the other thing, I'm in a relationship. I've been in a relationship for 6 years. And I think part of it too is on the other side of it now, inside of this relationship, she knows exactly, even knowing that I am pain avoidant and knowing all of these things, and knowing the right thing to do. I want to do the wrong thing so bad. It's like, run, find something fun to do. Let's make a joke. Let's do something different than feeling this pain. I do not like this pain. But she knows it, and she has permission to speak into my life. And so sometimes she'll just stop me and she'll look me in the eyes and she'll just say, it's okay to feel what you're feeling right now. Mm-hmm. It's okay for you to be pissed off. It's okay for you to be sad. It's okay for you to be hurt. And for me now, on the other side of it, I'm in that place. And ironically, Jill and I have that relationship now as well, where we're very, very close friends. We're super close friends. I mean, more than just, hey, we're friends. I'm friends with my ex. She's one of my very best friends. Mm-hmm. And we have that relationship now that we never had in a marriage, where I can go to Jill and say, Jill, I feel hurt when this happened. I need whatever, and believe me, we have done it. And when we made a movie together, and we still work together today in different projects, we still need to do that. And it's such a blessing to do that. It takes a lot of communication, a lot of patience, but that's where I'm at with it now. And so what I would say to people is learn. I'm a big fan of, I feel when I need. And also I'm a big fan of, you need to be a little bit elastic with that on your need, to be able to say, okay, what do I need to do to handle this situation with this person? And then make sure that you have communication of, if you know that your partner is pain avoidant or conflict avoidant, if your partner is conflict avoidant, then you need to be able to have permission to show that in a nice and kind way of, hey, maybe let's deal with this now. Let's not wait. Let's just take care of this because it's going to be better. That kind of thing. And I think that's what Lynn does with me, and that's what I do with her, and that's what I do with Jill.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron.
Is that kind of what you were asking?
Yeah. Whatever comes out, I appreciate hearing all of it. I'm wondering, Jill, if you want to add anything to that from your perspective and your side, being the more conflict avoidant one. I'm also a 9 on the Enneagram, so I can relate.
Oh, I love that. So we totally get each other. Yeah. That's the heart. So I love to read and study and learn from my own mistakes. And so with the work of John Gottman and Stan Tech and some of my favorites, I have realized that the best couples actually fight well. They don't avoid fights. And for me, it's still today. It's terrifying. I don't love conflict. I had an employee that I had to let go that was really hard. I loved her dearly. And I laid on the floor nauseous and sick, physically sick, because I knew I had to say some really hard things to someone I love. And still today, I have to just be brave and know that it's not the end of the world. And I know that's because of trauma, because we won't go into that, but we all have trauma around what does conflict mean. So if I can kind of redefine, wait, this is actually healthy for work relationships, partnerships. And I am just continuing to every day work on that and be present and be okay with conflict. But the biggest lesson is that the best relationships have healthy conflict, and most of them have more conflict than not conflict. Because they get to the root of those issues versus harboring resentment and unresolved issues, which actually creates much more stress.
Yeah, absolutely. Will, is there anything you want to say to that?
I think there's so many great gems in what both of you shared around, what, all of us are not new in relationship, right? We're, Krista and I are in our 50s. I don't need you to say what your ages are, but we're not beginners, right, in partnership. And I think that, if you think about myself in my 20s and listeners out there who are younger, who are just starting, who might have, certain perspectives like we often do, like you said, Jill, being 19 and thinking a lot. I mean, most 19-year-olds think that way. I did.
Yeah.
And just this idea that conflict, I mean, just the concept that conflict is not a red alarm, like a 5-alarm fire, that, oh my gosh, our relationship is doomed to fail because we're in conflict, is such a huge one. Understanding that going through conflict builds strength, right? Like going to the gym and lifting weights, you build strength through fighting well. And what you were saying, Aaron, I love too, about kind of knowing having the owner's manual of your partner.
Yeah.
And I think when I was younger, I used to think of myself as someone who was going to overcome and, integrate and empower every aspect of myself, my personality. But as you were saying, Jill, trauma comes in and it distorts, it still distorts my vision and the things that I'm vulnerable to, the weaknesses I have. And so, I think what you were saying, Aaron, about knowing your partner, I think I would have loved have been open enough to listen to people like us at that early age, and sort of taken the approach of, look, there are qualities in your personality that probably aren't going to change a lot. And it's probably better to learn how to work with them than, to be the stubborn mule that I was, of like, no, I'm not going to accept any of these limitations. I'm going to overcome everything. But life has taught, I mean, I've been in therapy for, more than 20 years, and certain things just don't move very far, has been my experience.
Well, I want to thank you, Will, for that. I want to also just jump to the documentary for a second, because we loved the movie. It was amazing. So many layers of complexity inside of the film. So we really want to acknowledge and appreciate you guys for doing that. And Jill, your vulnerability on so many levels inside of that documentary was beautiful. I think one of one of my favorite moments, my most favorite and most shocking and most horrifying moments out of all of it, was the moment that you shared, that you were talking about when I think Aaron came home. Aaron, your dad, I think it was your dad, had passed.
Yeah.
And you came home and you said something to Jill, which I'll let you guys tell the story. But it was just like a moment from like, oh God, to imagine this happening just sounds horrific. And so getting to the root of us all talking, being able to talk about our needs, address conflict, all this kind of stuff. I was like, what happened in between all of that? And you just addressed it. So I would love to hear the story from your mouths of that moment. What happened for the two of you there?
Yeah, maybe I'll start, and then Aaron, I want you to give your perspective
Absolutely.
too. The interesting thing is there's a layer here that's very, very profound. And the profound layer is that we divorced in 2017. And in 2021, we came together to make a film about my life, my illness, and the divorce. And so when you see that film and that part, I am sitting in a chair here in my condo across from the director, Daniel Grace, and my ex-husband. And we had taken those scenes before on a much more superficial level. And we all knew in our hearts this wasn't going deep enough to get to the listener, the viewer, to understand the profound grief and trauma that I went through, and that Aaron did too, that we both. And they sat there, Dan and Aaron, before we ever filmed that scene. And Aaron came up to me like this close, and he said, Jill, I'm here, and you can say whatever you want. I'm going to be behind the camera. I love you. I support you. I don't care how hard this is for me to hear what you have to say, but I want you to be so real and so true to what you experienced. And I will hold this space. There's no judgment. I'm not going to stop you. And it took us, like, we had filmed this months ago and it wasn't where we wanted to go. And we had to go back to the drawing board. And Dan too has that heart. Like, they sat there. It was Dan and Aaron and I filming that scene, and they gave me permission to go to the depths of the pain. And you know what happened? So we had this level of, he's filming me talking about the trauma that he induced in my life. He gave me permission to totally be free with my words, so I wasn't filtering. He said, we'll edit later. You just say your stuff, right? And so I had to trust him and trust Dan to be completely vulnerable. And then the profound thing that happened was, as I was expressing this in the filming of the movie, we had forgiven one another. We were in a great space. But, you know, the level of profound transformation for both of us in truly seeing each other, I saw him as this gracious individual that allowed me to share my trauma and pain. And he came through and said, I see what I did in this relationship and what happened, and I am asking at the deepest level for your forgiveness. So what happened is the filming, I would say if no one ever saw the film, Aaron and I were transformed in the process because we literally saw each other for the first time in a new light.
Wow.
And what I explained in the film, it was after almost on my 40th birthday to the day, he came home. And now I understand there's no judgment. He was traumatized. He had lost his father. He had never dealt with some deep pain, and he was searching. But he came home, and I didn't know all of this. And again, we weren't connected like we should have been. And he said, I don't love you anymore. I don't want to be with you anymore. And it was an absolute shattering and shock to my beautiful illusion of what I believed to be true, because just moments prior to him coming home, I would have said with every ounce of belief in my heart that I had the best husband in the world, I had the best marriage in the world. Divorce is not an option. So it shattered completely my happy bubble that we had created together of illusion. But guess what? That was the start of the best thing that ever happened to me, because by shattering my illusion, that wasn't true anyway, I had to go to the depths of my own trauma, my own issues. And I will say the best part of us reconciling and continuing to work together was we both owned all of our garbage, all of our trauma. I never said, Aaron, it's all your fault. That I literally was like, what's my part? And at the beginning, I took on too much ownership because I was like, it's all my fault, right? And wasn't. But I think the core message here, if we have one, is we both were very hurt and broken people. But one thing we did is we said, what part did I play in this? And that is the magic sauce for going on to have a healthy relationship after a very traumatic breakup.
Amazing. I would say it's also very healthy during it. But wow, thank you so much, Jill. I just feel the tears come to my eyes with the story of healing with the two of you and this filmmaking and the tenderness that can still arise, you know, years later. That was like four years later after the actual moment that happened. I'm curious, Aaron, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Well, yeah. First of all, I just had an epiphany on your podcast that just blew my mind. I think why that moment was so profound with Jill and I is we had asked for forgiveness to one another. We had spoken many times before this and acknowledged our shortcomings and where we could have done better and all of this stuff. But I am a 7, and I am not afraid of conflict. I don't want pain, but I'm not afraid of conflict because I want to be heard and I want to be right. So when I'm behind a camera as a director of a documentary, you'll watch documentaries and you'll say, I don't know if that's right. But what you've got to realize is those people that are on the camera, it's their perception of what happened. And I knew as a director in that moment, as a producer, that like, this is Jill's perspective. It doesn't matter what is said. Like, this is her perspective. And this is what we're capturing. But what it did was it made, of course, I'm filming her. I am not to speak, right? So what I was doing there was giving her permission to speak without hearing back from me. Just to speak, just to let it out. And I think that's why that moment is probably a super profound moment for us. And what a great thing, because I'm sure you have a lot of listeners out there that one of them is the person that talks a lot. And one of them is the person that is trying to, okay, it's not only am I not conflict avoidant, I'm going to fix the freaking conflict, right? I'm going to fix it.
Right.
So you can steamroll people, especially people who are conflict avoidant. So that's a big epiphany for me. I don't know if you wanted to know the depth of like why and how I got to that point, but I would say, just to be very honest and brutally honest, Jill had started this clinic in Boulder and she was crushing it. and she was doing really well. And I was traveling back and forth to Nashville, working a lot. And there's times we started off with saying we would never be apart more than a week. And then I'm like, Jill, I've got to be gone for 2 weeks. And then I've got to do a tour of Europe, and I'm going to be gone for a month or a month and a half. And we just let it go. And Jill didn't, again, we didn't have that communication place in our relationship where Jill can say, hey, I'm dying here. And when my father passed, I had some needs, and a friend passed before my father passed. I had actually 3 deaths in a row within a year. One of my closest friends, my father and my mother. And so in that moment, when I said, I'm done, now after therapy and after years, what I realized is I never said, Jill, I need you with me. I can't do this alone. I have to have you here. And so like, she's only been trained this whole time that Aaron handles Aaron stuff, Jill handles Jill stuff, and we just kick everybody's ass and we just do great, right? And when I wasn't doing great, I did not have the communication skills to say, I am literally falling apart here.
Right. Totally.
And because I didn't realize that, it was the only thing I could do is look at Jill and say, man, she's failing, instead of looking at the fact that I'm not able to communicate my needs well. So
yeah, you're really highlighting the hyper independent model that I think
and we were both that way.
Totally.
So, yeah.
That I think so many people can fall into for many different reasons, including trauma, including history, including not seeing different models. And it can be extremely painful. It is extremely painful in my perspective. I mean, the art of we is really about learning to go from the I hyper independent model to the we model of what you both are communicating now. So, and I also want to say that, something that we stand for over here is in our relationship is standing for each other's greatest expression, no matter what that means for our partnership or no matter how scary that gets. And what I'm really hearing about the two of you is that even though you're not married anymore, what I'm hearing is that is your partnership now. I mean, you can tell me if that feels accurate or not, but it sounds like you both really stand for each other's greatest expression and greatest potential. And this moment of the filmmaking and was a big moment of Aaron, you allowing Jill to be expressed fully in that moment and having that repair happen on a deeper level.
Yeah, like we literally repaired the biggest wound filming the movie, which is why to us, like, yes, if people see it and are impacted, that's amazing. But the transformation that happened to us through the filming is by far the greatest gift. And I'd love to mention, Krista, your definition. I've learned a different definition of love, and it's very similar to what you just expressed. And that is creating a space for the optimal transformation of another human being, regardless of what that means for you. And I get so excited about that because that's not always how I was living. But with that, there's this real like allowing, like even Aaron and I, if I truly love him, which I do, then him going on to be with a woman and a family and in this space where now he's thriving is my greatest expression of love for him. And he does the same for me in my dating life. And it's really neat to frame it that way, because then it doesn't really matter that it's not a marriage. We can still unconditionally love one another and optimize. And we can do that with our friends and our family and our people in our life. And that excites me.
Yeah, so well said. Thank you for sharing that. I love your definition. It's beautiful. We hope you're enjoying this episode. I want to take a quick break to let you know about a gift we created for you and your partner. We compiled our top 10 relationship agreements that have been so powerful in supporting the success of our partnership that we even turned them into our wedding vows. These agreements help us stay connected, growing, and thriving as a couple, and they've been critical to help us create a kind of we that's way beyond what we've ever experienced before. You can download this free gift at KristaVanderveer.com. That's KristaVanderveer.com. Also, if you enjoy our podcast, it would be so meaningful to us if you left us a rating and review. Not only does it help others find us, but it gives us critical feedback on how we're doing. Thanks in advance, and now back to the episode.
Jill, you talked about this, what we like to call on our show the growth oriented mindset of, what's my part and how did I contribute my part to getting to where we are today? And that perspective is not one that I was taught as a child. And I'm wondering where you would attribute to, gaining that point of view. Is that something that you were taught in your family and the farm life that you grew up on, or is that something that you learned along the way through this process?
Interesting, because my story goes through cancer and Crohn's disease and mold-related illness, and I've been like this wounded healer my whole life, and I didn't really know, but that's clearly the journey I was supposed to have. But I do remember from the very first incident, which was 25 years old, aggressive cancer, being like, okay, what chemicals led to this? What processes led to this? What things on the farm led to this? And so somehow inside, I definitely feel like I had an innate interest in discovering the why behind, really at functional medicine, that's what I do. So I loved learning the why, and I never minded my responsibility in that. And what's interesting is right after the divorce, it was so traumatic for me that I immediately went to my fix-it Jill, the farm girl, that was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? What's wrong with me? And I took, instead of taking the 50-50 like we should and we have, I took 100% initially, like, oh my gosh, I totally failed. I messed this up. And poor Aaron was at that moment, he was traumatized, dissociated. He was not able to show up and heal. But I'm like, let's get to therapy. Let's do this. And what I learned in about 9 months of therapy was at that point, he was completely unable to show up and repair.
Mm-hmm.
And I, for the first time, felt like I was, had permission, because we won't go into my own trauma. My own trauma was standing up to inappropriate male authority and male, kind of domination from past childhood abuse. And he wasn't dominating or anything, but for me, the healing was actually saying, oh, I have autonomy to say I can file for divorce. I can actually change this situation versus just let it happen and freeze. So for me, the awakening was actually taking that choice to say, I need to file for divorce, at least for now, until we can reconcile. And it was very empowering. So I had to go from owning everything, then owning my part, and then actually taking a step that would empower me out of the freeze state into a more active role in, no, I can choose differently now.
Really well
Beautiful, thank
said,
you.
Jill. Yeah, I love that. And so it sounds like after that moment happened with Aaron, you coming home from your father's death, there was 9 months of couples therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
and in that time, I broke. I had, and I mean that, and I had no capability of having emotion. Forget love. I lost all ability to have emotion for probably a 2-year period of time after that.
Wow.
It took a long time to break that down into some really deep therapy to break that down and figure out where. I remember the first time I cried again or had emotion again. It was just
Wow.
mind blowing. So yeah, we tried therapy, but I was a wall. I was just a wall, and I can't imagine multiple times a week going to therapy with someone who was just a blank slate as you're pouring your heart out trying to fix it. That just breaks my heart for Jill.
What was the wall, Aaron? If you can, I know you spoke to many things on this episode already, but if you can say, why was that happening at that point? Was it the deaths in your life? Was it the not feeling connected to Jill?
Yeah, it was most definitely the deaths, because there had been 2 deaths back to back. There's also a physical part of it. I didn't realize at the time that I had Lyme disease, and that was doing some havoc in my brain as well. At the same exact time all of this was going on that same film shoot that I was having a hard time with, I got bitten by a tick and contracted Lyme disease.
Oh, wow.
And so there was that going on. I think it was seeing my parents pass, and I had thought I had a perfect childhood and perfect parents, and I didn't realize that until they passed that I had so much pain and resentment. So it was childhood trauma, abandonment issues that were really, really locking me up. I didn't know that at the time. This is after a lot of therapy.
Right.
But I had a lot of trauma in my childhood that I had no idea. My mother's funeral, my siblings and I are all sitting together and we're laughing and we're talking about our best time. And I'm like, oh, my favorite time was that summer where we went camping for the whole entire summer. And my siblings like, oh, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, you remember we went to this lake and we went camping the whole summer. And my siblings were like, we were homeless. We were living in a tent
Wow.
because we were homeless.
Oh my
They're
goodness.
like,
Holy
don't you
cow.
remember? We left this house, we went camping, and then we went to another house when we finally got into another house again, and we're in another school.
Wow.
And I was a young kid, but just things like that you just don't know, and all of this repression, and all of those things, all of the pain, way before I met Jill, when my father passed, like it was just and it was actually before my father passed. It was probably when my friend passed. I couldn't even cry at her funeral. I was just so devastated. I was broken. I just had broken down. So yeah, I don't know if that helps in explaining. That's the best I can say. So go get therapy. That's my message to everybody.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really impressed with the result of your therapy, Aaron. I mean, just the way you describe your experience, it's so rich, and you clearly have come to know yourself in such a deep way. And, as a multi-decade therapist myself from my profession as a psychiatrist, I can just, I think it's fair for me to say that not everyone has the same outcome that it sounds like you've had from just such deep healing. And I'm just really inspired and impacted in a beautiful way by how far you went down into the depths of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember I went into a pretty in-depth go away therapy, type of thing for a couple of weeks. And I remember sitting in the parking lot and I just wanted to run, 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 run. I'm like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. I cannot do this. I cannot do this. I cannot do this. And then, I'm sitting there and, there's a big group of people and I am that person that nobody wants to be around because I'm like, this is effing crazy that we're all here. I mean, this is just the most stupid thing I've ever done in my life. To within a couple of weeks, like my whole life had turned upside down and in a good way.
Wow.
And it really just revealed a lot. I've got a deep desire to love people and serve them. And what I had to come to the conclusion of is I had been doing that my whole life and I hadn't done it for myself. And by going to therapy and taking care of myself and digging deep in a maybe different spirituality than I was brought up in or whatever else, and all of those things, it's just the reason I was able to do it and the reason that I would encourage people to do it is it's liberating and it allows you to be that light that you want to be on in the world. I'm still got a long way to go, but man, I couldn't be here without going to therapy and dealing with that trauma.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious with this journey. So the two of you did get a divorce, obviously. Aaron, you were locked up in this kind of freeze mode for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Jill, I'm imagining you were just trying to regain yourself under that, after that big unexpected bubble popping year. What happened next with the two of you?
For me, that there was literally a time at the end of the 9 months where our therapist, we had a PAC therapist, so Tatkin's work, and she's watching us. She's watching the fight or flight and the expressions. She saw me shut down completely. And it was at that time, Aaron, as we actually have had a great relationship. We've never had any abuse or anything weird. We just had dysfunction. But he can be very intense. And he looked at me with this intense look, and I didn't see this happening. I didn't know it was happening. But what happened was I froze. My therapist recognized that. And she just said one thing. She said, Jill, have you ever had any abuse?
Mm-hmm.
I'm 40 years old. Aaron said one word of a name of someone in our family. I fell apart. I started sobbing and shaking. And here I am, this analytical engineer background, and I'm looking at myself like going, what the hell? Get yourself together. Like, what is going on? But then on another level, I knew, I'm like, I'm not making this up. Whatever is in here is so deep and so profound. And that was my first awakening to the fact that I had childhood abuse and trauma. And it was at the hands of a male relative. And that was the breaking open of all of my healing. And what happened then was I realized, like I alluded to earlier, is by me saying, my adult self, I can take care of that little girl who felt unprotected and say, I can choose divorce as my autonomy to move forward out of the freeze. And Aaron had nothing to do with this. He has never done anything but love me well. But because that was a trigger, as we are in intimate relationships, of an old trauma being re-experienced, I literally in that 24-hour period had the complete awakening of, number one, what happened, number two, how my marriage had affected me, shut down, probably conflict avoidant, because I saw this same abuser in my male partner, even though he had nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Number three, I had a choice now. I could actually come out of that freeze state and act through the divorce and through the autonomy of me as my older self taking care of my younger self. And then I went on a 2-3 year journey to find loving self-compassion. And that started with trusting my intuition, that I knew what was right for my body, my mind, my spirit, and trusting that, which started with divorce. And then after that, starting to love. Aaron alluded to this too. We both really went on a journey to learn to love ourselves first, to really accept every part of ourselves, the ugly parts, the conflict avoidant parts, the parts that didn't show up for each other, and have that deepest loving compassion. And then we can, just like Aaron, I love to love people. We both have that in common. But we can't go out in the world to love people unless we love that broken little child. And I said in the movie, and I've often said, we were two little kids that were traumatized, that never dealt with that until our marriage fell apart. And what happened was the beautiful ability for us both then in the years that followed to go deep to those little kids that were hurting and broken and didn't have their needs met, and to heal them. But we were the ones, not our partners.
Right.
We were the ones that got to do the work around healing our little kids. And that's why, that's the core of coming back together as a healthy partnership, is like, I can take care of my little girl now. And Aaron can take care of his little boy now. And we both have the deepest, like when I see him, any hurt that's ever been brought on by him in our relationship, I just see that broken little boy, and I love him so much. And I'm so sorry, Aaron, that you had to go through that. And he does the same for me. And that compassion first to ourselves allows us to extend it to every single person we meet, because everybody is this big old body walking around with a little kid inside that's broken.
Yeah.
And when we bring that to the world,
Yeah.
it transforms our relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jill and I have a relationship that we will speak to that little boy or that little girl in one another's relationship and say, I see you, you know, because, especially Jill, she's a powerhouse, man. That's another thing. Just remember, it doesn't matter if you're on TV, the most famous person, the most wealthy person, the most successful person. All of us are just those little kids, man.
Yeah.
All of us are just those little kids. Have compassion and kindness for one another.
Yeah.
So true.
Such a beautiful journey. And I'm so inspired, Jill. Like I feel like in the different parts of my life, I've been able to go only so far with healing all of my parts. There's so many parts. And I think it's going to be a lifelong journey, but I know that without the security and foundation that I have with Will, like I've only been able to get so far alone. And it's been really about this relationship that's helped me get to the next level. And just hearing your journey of going from filing for divorce to really doing this deep work with yourself, and it sounds like both of you were totally on that train, is really inspiring. And I love to hear how you are in relationship now. It sounds really empowering. Did you end up coming together one day and being like, did you ever like say, we need to take a break after you got divorced, and then came back and were like, hey, can we be back in a relationship? Or how did that unfold?
I don't think we said we need to take a break. I think we just took a break because I think we had to deal probably for about a year. We didn't talk that much. Is that about right, Jill?
Yeah, maybe even more, like a year or two, I'd say.
Yeah, a year or two, and she was doing her thing, I was doing mine, and then I think it was just after healing and probably coming together and asking for forgiveness, probably for me going to her because she had already done that. I think we started building that trust back and communicating again and having those conversations. So much so that when I knew that my relationship with Wendy Ann would be somewhat serious, and I knew that it had a potential to be unserious right at the beginning, I let her know. I'm like, hey, you need to know, like, my ex is like literally one of my very best friends, maybe my very best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, you don't have to fear, you don't have to like anything. We are just super close, and I need you to be okay with it. And it was so important to me at that point that I was like, if it's not okay, let me know, because
Right.
I just need it to be okay, because Jill and I had so much history together that I knew that she's an important person in my life that needs to be in my life to help me to ground and everything else. And not that Wendy Ann isn't. Wendy Ann is most definitely, it's an amazing relationship. In a lot of ways, what it's done is allow me to grow even more and more and more. I've learned about this word commitment. I don't know, it's a pretty big one. But this literally, I mean, she's just like this next level of healing that's happened for me.
Yeah.
But my relationship with Jill is that important. It got to that point. I don't remember how we started getting closer and closer, but we just started talking more. Wouldn't you say,
Well, in the
Jill?
film, like we already said, really, like it was a powerful to a whole new level. Like the
Okay.
film really took us in a different level of healing.
Yeah. But I would say we just started talking more and more, you know, randomly. And then we talked about making a film together, and then we got really close after that. So,
Well, I want to give you both kudos, and I know we're going to wrap up here in a minute, but I know, with Will, your divorce, I think that there's always hopes that we're going to be, and maybe there are, maybe there aren't, but some part of us might hope that we'll have an ongoing relationship with this person we were in a relationship for so long. And of course, we can have hopefully like a very non-contentious divorce, and hopefully all these things can happen, but very rarely does it seem like the partnership is still intact in some form, and so beautifully and so healthy in the way that the two of you have done it. So I just want to give you both lots of congratulations, like a deep congratulations. Like this is something that is really hard to accomplish.
thank you. We realize, I think we both realize that it's very special and that it's very different.
Yeah.
But even if it's just a matter of we help people to have a little bit more compassion with one another and a little bit more patience with the person that we're no longer with, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
And Jill and I have chosen a path of love, and just because we're no longer together doesn't mean we can't love one another and care for one another and want the very, very best for one another. I mean, when she wins, that's a win for me, because like it's a much better way to go through life. It's a much easier way to go through life.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Rather than holding on to bitterness or resentment.
Jill, do you have any last minute thoughts also about, for the people that are listening, that would like to have the kind of partnership that you and Aaron now have? Do you have any words of wisdom for them, or any closing thoughts that you want to share?
Let go of bitterness, resentment, and forgive easy. Just forgive. And then when you look at the person, and this goes for our ex-partners, our current partners, our employees, our employers, our friends and family, look at them with the deepest love and compassion, and know that everybody has a story and a journey, and everybody has a little inner child. Because when we can look at people with that, they can misbehave and we can still love them. And it's almost fun to be like, oh, sweetheart, it's okay. I still love you. And you start with yourself, but by extending that compassion, it just makes life easier.
Well said. Thank you
I
so
think
much.
I would also just say this. Jill does an amazing job of, she doesn't need to be right. And I don't need to be right in our relationship. We just need to be there. Right. And I think that's something that we've done better at. And so I'm just trying to think of maybe something that would help couples. Like that's an easy thing. Like, yeah, let go of resentment. Think about that little kid and stop needing to be right. Because a lot of times marriages fail because you just want to be right, And so I don't need to be right.
Yeah. I would take it a step further and say also about the resentment piece is to address the resentments.
Yeah.
Rather than just let them go without addressing them.
Another thing that Jill and I have done is we have shared with one another how we hurt one another. And so now I can take that in my current relationship, and she makes my current relationship better, and I make her relationships better, because it's once you've given that permission to share how it felt when certain things happen and how that all came to be, it's huge. It is just huge.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful. So beautiful.
sorry, I keep going.
I could go. I
Told
could
you
keep
I'm
going for
You could
hours
keep
with the two of you. So many complex layers and amazing layers. And thank you so much both for coming. And I know that you have a big project coming up in a live event here in Boulder, Colorado. Is that something that you would be interested in sharing with our people about what's happening?
Absolutely. So October 15th through 19th, we have Iris Global Health Film Festival. And again, this was born out of Jill and I's heart to heal and love the world. And we did that with our own film with Doctor Patient, and shared the film, and we took it to some festivals and did well. But the main thing that happened is we'd do these Q&As after these festivals, and you would see how it would impact these people. Jill's story is so powerful and it's so beautiful, and she was so vulnerable, and it impacted people. Like they connected so deeply. And there would be people in the audience they had no hope anymore, and they had hope of healing. And then there were doctors in the audience saying, holy cow, I could do this differently. I mean, we had a doctor who was probably 60 years old, and he's like, I can do medicine like that? I can have that kind of compassion and empathy for my patients. And it was like this light bulb moment. And then we actually had couples in the audience, as Jill and I are sitting there, revealing through tears that their marriage is about over. And they're seeing two peoples whose marriage is over, who choose to love and care for one another. And so we see all this, and we're like, holy cow, the power of film. And I've always known it, but then I really got it. And so my business partner, Daniel, and I decided to start a nonprofit, the Iris Arts Institute. And our first project is the Iris Global Health Film Festival. And Jill came along on our board for Iris because she believes in it wholeheartedly. And so, yeah, we're bringing other films to the Boulder area from all over the world. We've had, I think, 28 different countries submitted films, people from 28 different countries, and we're going to have 33 films. And we're really excited because we know that at the end of those films, there's going to be people sitting there watching them that are going to be impacted and changed and given hope and seen. It's helping them to be seen because they see themselves on the screen. And so we're excited about it. So please come if you're in Boulder.
That's
October
great.
15th to the 19th, and it's Iris at ighff.org. Or
Great.
it's just IGH.
We'll make sure it's in the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll put it all in the show notes and put the
All right,
links also
perfect.
to find the two of you separately. We thank you so much for coming and being on the show and sharing your hearts and your love and your tears and all of the wisdom that you have to share with us and our audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both for the work you're doing. We appreciate it
Yes,
so
this
much.
is amazing work. Keep going.
Thank
Keep
you.
doing
Thanks,
it.
Jill.
I can see
Thanks,
in
Aaron.
you guys, there's just this light coming out of you. I love it. I love it. And so, and kindness, you know that you feel that warmth inside of someone, and you just feel that warmth and that kindness. And so
Thank you.
it's radiating from you guys. So.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful day.